1, 2. Testing. Testing, 1, 2. Testing. Testing. Testing, 1, 2. Testing, 1, 2.
All right, we'll start in about 1 minute. Hi, Charlotte. How you
We
doing?
met in Dr. Place's EDD 901 back in the fall. So it's nice to see you again.
All right, we're going to get started. Before we get started, everyone needs like 5 index cards. Do you have 5 index cards? If not, I can take care of it. All right.
Raise your hand so we'll know. Thank you, sir. These two?
All 5.
Oh, okay, thank you. Thank you.
Let me grab you 5 more. I'll get you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, what is it, 5:30, 5:35, so still technically afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Roger Cleveland. I'm a professor in a college of education not far from here at EKU. May have some of y'all in my classes the last few years online, maybe teacher leader, doctoral program, possibly. So we're going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in schools. I really don't want it to be like a training per se. I like to have it be a conversation. So training implies the person with the clicker has all the knowledge, right? And that's not the case. We have a knowledge base in the room, so I want to actually have some conversations and interchange ideas. I told Mr. Say, I recognize that you all been working all day. So as I tell my night class students, we can not take a break, use the rules of 2 feet when you need to take a break or whatever, and we'll leave about 7:10, something like that. Does that work? Yeah. For some reason I thought it would, but I'd at least ask first, right? Okay, so what we're going to talk about today, we're going to have common language. So when we leave here, we want to make sure everybody's on the same page about diversity, inclusion, and education. I'll make no assumptions, right, that we all have the same definitions of what these 3 things mean. And 2, that when we're out and about, we're in our schools or in the community, and someone asks you about what does equity mean, you're saying the same thing that she's saying. So you got to have common language, whether it's about diversity or not. Anything the district's doing, we should have common language, right? And a common message. And so we're going to talk about these 3 areas. I'm not going to rush through it. If I don't get through the entire presentation, so be it. Unfortunately, he's invited me back already, so I'll be back. And so I'm not going to just rush through it just so we can get through it. We're on something that, you know, we're getting more information and we're having an understanding and learning about it. We'll stay right there. And then we're going to talk about barriers to diversity and inclusion, primarily just around implicit bias and microaggressions. So I always believe context before content. That's what the good facilitators do, right? Educators, we give students context before content, right? Contextualized learning. Okay. So how I'm going to do that is called open mic. What I'm going to do is show you a couple of quotes, and I want you to get your interpretation of the quote. There's no right or wrong answer, just your interpretation. All right, all through the lens of diversity, and more importantly, our students. All right, our students. So here's the first quote. The child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Think about our students here in Estill County. And then I need a few of you all to share out your thoughts or interpretation of this quote. A child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. What is that quote saying to you? It's not that deep, y'all. Come on. Thoughts, comments? Okay. All y'all here? Y'all good? Okay. Someone else, thank you. Someone else. They're going to try to get attention, whether it's good or bad. Now, I always like to take a step further. Students are not only trying to get attention, that's a process to get a connection. They try to get attention so they can get a connection, right? Someone else. Good, thank you. Give me at least one more. I'll listen y'all talk the last 15 minutes, so I know y'all can talk. So.
I think maybe it says that, if we can find a way to deal with the child now, we're going to deal with them at some point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Not do it proactively instead of reactionary.
Exactly. This reminds me, sort of what you were saying right there. Like one of my first jobs in education was they called them social interventionists. This is in Cincinnati Public Schools. And so I had 2 middle schools that I was working with and had it's really tough schools. I mean, one was in the heart of the West End of Cincinnati, and the other was on the other side of town. But anyway, was there like 6, 7 years, and then I left. Now, my father still lives in Cincinnati, so I was somewhere, this area called Over the Rhine, okay? And I was with a friend of mine. These 3 kids walked up. These kids then, they were probably like 16, 17. And their intentions was to rob us, right? As they got closer and closer, I was like, this kid looks familiar for some reason. And I had him like in the 8th grade at Bloom Middle School. He's like, oh, my bad, Mr. Cleveland. What you mean, my bad? You didn't rob me. That's not like you stepped on my shoe, But I had him like 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. But I had a connection with him. I had a relationship with him, right? It's important. That piece is important. So let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you some questions, but you can't ask me a question, okay? All you do is raise your hand. If you were walking down the street and a building was on fire, how many of y'all would rush into that building? Show of hands. Okay, not a one. Okay, smart people. You're walking down the street, the building's on fire, and there's some people in that building. How many of y'all would rush in? I got a few hands back there. Maybe 3. A couple of y'all like, I don't know. You're walking down the street, the building's on fire, there's some people in that building, and in fact, some of those people are your relatives. How many of y'all rush into the building? Some of y'all said it depends on the relative, right? Exactly. I got a couple of cousins like that myself. I understand. So the first time I said, how many of y'all rush into a burning building? No hands. And then I said, there's some people in that building. How many of y'all rush in? 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe. And then I said, some of those people are your relatives. The majority of y'all raised your hands. Here's my point with our students. Students are not going to follow you unless they know your purpose and your mission. But more importantly, students are not going to take a risk unless there's a relationship. It's as simple as that. They're not going to take a risk without that. All right, what about this one? When someone with the authority of an educator describes the world and you're not in it, there's a moment of psychic disequilibrium as if you looked into a mirror and saw nothing. When someone with the authority of an educator, and we have power in classrooms, with the authority of an educator describes the world and you're not in it, there's a moment of psychic disequilibrium as you looked into a mirror and saw nothing.
That can't relate to anything you're saying because they haven't had those life experiences, or their world at home is totally different than the world you're describing. So it's a blank slate for them.
Exactly. They have to see something, right? All right, what else? Say it again. Okay. The other piece, well, I want to jump ahead of myself. I won't say that. Thank you. Give me one more. You got to use examples, right? And what that is called is some students have more cultural capital than others. In other words, if you're using examples that only middle-class folks can connect to, or children, and some children are living on the backside and hollers and all these different places and using examples, they have no idea what you're talking about. Those kids who are middle class have more cultural capital. It's the exact same thing if you decide to go work in San Antonio, right? And you're in San Antonio and 65% of the kids are Latinx kids and the rest kids are white. And you're using examples the white kids can actually respond to. Those other kids have less cultural capital. Or you can flip it. You have a Latinx teacher and she's using number of examples of Hispanic culture. The white and African-American students, like, what are you talking about? So it could be about race, it could be about class, it could be a number of different things. But keep that in mind, but students have to see themselves in the curriculum. They have to see themselves in the curriculum. All right, this is where we'll do an activity with the card, so you do need something to write with. Hopefully you'll have something. All right. So the activity is called, I know you are, but what am I? I know you are, but what am I? So I'm going to show you 5 descriptors, one at a time. And every time I show you one, you write down on the card how you identify with that descriptor. Okay? It's real easy. It don't require a whole lot of thought. But it's all about you, not about other people. It's about you as an individual and how you identify with these words I'm going to put up on the screen. We good? All right. Here's the first word. Religion. How do you identify as it relates to religion? So you can put Protestant, Catholic, Southern Baptist, none of your business, I don't. Whatever you want to put on that card. It's your business. No one else is going to see that card but you. All right? Gender. How do you identify as it relates to gender? You can put male, female, non-binary, whatever you want to put. It's your business. We're talking about you. No one else will see these cards. 1 per card. Sorry about that. 1 per card. On your third card, age or generational ID. So you can put your age, or you can put millennial, Generation Z, X, baby boomer, Generation T, whatever it is. Or you can say, none of your business. I'm not putting my age down. So we have 2 cards left, correct? Your next card, sexual orientation. And on your last card, race or ethnicity. We good? All right, next step. Now the next part, okay, requires a little tearing and things like that, so I don't want the folks who take care of the auditorium to get mad at me because y'all didn't pick y'all's paper up. Okay? So look at your 5 cards. Look at them like you're playing Uno or spades. Don't let anybody see them. Okay? This is what I want you to do. Look at your 5 cards, and I want you to rip up the one that is least important to you. Of those 5 cards, rip up the one that is least important to you. Just rip it up. You have to make confetti, just 1 rip's cool. All right, 4 cards left, right? Of those 4 cards, I want you to rip up the one that is least important to you. Three cards left. Of those 3 cards, I want you to rip up the one that is least important to you. Now, usually, BC, before COVID, I would have you find someone, hold your card up. So I'll hold my card to you, you hold yours to mine. I'll take one of hers without looking and rip it up, and she'll take one of mine without looking and rip it up. So you end up with 1 card. But since we can't do that, CDC guidelines, I'm gonna have you rip up the one anyway. So you have 2 left. Rip up the card that is least important to you, and you'll end up with 1 card. All right. Now, let's debrief. What was easy to give up? What What was easy? When I first said, look at your 5 cards, rip up the one that's least important to you, I'm going to make a prediction. I'm going to say the 2/3 of you all said age. If you said age, raise your hand. I did this BC before COVID in Anaheim, California. We had 750 people in this convention center, and we did this. 2/3, if not more, people said age. Okay? But others, what else was easy to give up other than age? What else did you all say that you feel free? Sexual orientation was easy to give up. What else? Anything different? Okay, a little anxiety right there, right? What was difficult, to your point, what was difficult to give up? What was difficult to give up? When you got down to like 2 or 3? I would say probably at least half would say religion. How many say that? Raise your hand if that's the case. Never fails, okay? So there's no right or wrong answers because you're answering this for yourself, right? You're answering this for yourself. It's about what you value, correct? Because some people say, well, I get people say all the time, I didn't believe in religion because that's not important to me. And then some people will say, you know, gender is really important to me. So when you start getting down to like 2 or 3, really 2, what do you learn about yourself? As you start, who started feeling a little angst when they got down to like 2 or 3 cards and you had to start picking one you're going to rip up? Who had an issue with that, making a decision what to tear up when you got down to 2? And you was like, man, I want both of them, right? You're struggling. How many of y'all said there's a difference in any of them? Didn't really matter. You could tear them all up, you could leave them, whatever. So I was doing this in Indianapolis with some colleagues of mine at the university, and we started talking about this, and he said, my experience is usually when a large group of people, if it's ethnically diverse, women will say it's difficult to give up gender, and people of color will say it's difficult to give up race. Why do you think that is? I mean, it never fails. It's almost like age for everybody. I don't care what the room looks like. Almost everybody says age was easy to give up. It don't make a difference. Gender, race, class, you know, age is one of them. So why do you think women find it difficult to give up gender?
For me, it would be because I'm able to have children and men cannot give birth, and so that's hard for me to give that up as a mom.
Okay. Anyone else? That's what I hear a lot of times. You know, that's really important to some women. There's some women that may not be. Yes, ma'am. Because women are awesome. I used to get some of those also. You know, the awesome thing. I don't refute it. I know my place. I still. Exactly. So we're having this conversation, and one of the professors I work with at EKU, he's white male. I said, what was easy to give up? He said, race. And I said, really? He said, yeah, I didn't even think about it. I was like, wow, I find that surprising. He said, why? And I said, I think about it quite a bit. Well, I don't think about it, but people make me think about it on a regular. He said, I don't see that, Roger. And I said, okay, let me put it where you can get it. We both came to EKU in 2008. You have a son, I have a son. If they go to their classes on the first day of class at EKU, more than likely, your son's culture is part of the curriculum, and my son's culture is an elective. He said, wow, I never thought about it that way. So you don't have to. What this is about, what individual people value. And when we talk about diversity and inclusion, things like that, you never lose the core of who you are. That's not what that's about. It's about respecting differences, right? But not changing who you are. So here's a $64,000 question, though, for our students here in Estill County. Because remember I said that it wasn't because of COVID, you all stand up, find somebody, and they just take your card and rip it up, and they do it up. What are some things our students here may have to give up to feel a sense of belonging in our schools? What are some things we may be unintentionally ripping up about our students? Or they may give up just so they can fit in our schools? That's what this is about. It's about us, but it's also about thinking about our students, that maybe sometimes they're leaving some things at the front door of the school because they may not be accepted in our schools. Can you give me an example of what that may look like? Family stereotypes. Okay. What else?
I think for our area, it would be their sexuality.
I guarantee you, as we stand in this building, and where's the middle school? Okay. And I guarantee in middle school, also in the high school, there are kids who would love to come out, but they know. You know. And here's the thing. It's not as much as, you address the issue when other kids are bullying other kids because of that, but it's really about how the adults respond. Because they watch us. Silence is consent. So when they're getting bullied because of their sexuality, because of this or whatever, if we pretend that that's not happening, it's telling the other students that's okay. Silence is consent. So it may be that, it could be their religion, it could be their parents' political affiliation. It could be a number of things that they leave at the door because they don't know how people are going to receive that. That's what this is really about, that you don't want anybody tearing up about who you are. Whether you're a staff member, leadership, faculty, whatever it is, that you want to create a sense of belonging in our school. All right, so could you do this activity with our, well, I know we can do it with our staff, but what about our students? And when I've done it with students, high school or college, you got to have a really pretty good relationship with students. You got to create a climate, a safe place, because if you don't do it right, students can be outed or a lot of other things, right? So they're really careful. You look at the first day of school like, all right, we got activity for you. It's probably not going to work, right? Even with faculty, you have to think about it. All right, thoughts, comments, observations of this activity. What do you think? What's the takeaway? Say it again?
I found that I don't like to give things up.
You don't
Well, I mean, age was easy. The rest of the time, not necessarily.
But when you got down, what's your name?
My name?
Yes. Huh?
Kathy.
Kathy. I'm glad you said that, Kathy. Kathy said after the age, it got tough for her, right? So, Kathy, would you say that the rest of those things are important to you?
I think it's how I identify. I mean, faith was really hard. I didn't give it up. That was my last one. I think female, I identify as a female. I birth children. But I think even, gender, I mean, I think ethnicity, while I think I can flourish, hopefully being any, but I am Caucasian. That's my history, So I think that for that, because I identify with each of those things personally for myself, it is kind of hard to give up on them.
It's really difficult to give up those things.
We can always grow in those areas, but it's hard to give them up.
It's very hard to give up, right? So how many of y'all, listen to what Kathy's saying, how many of y'all say that some of these things that I was asking you all to rip up are essential to who you are? How many of y'all would say that? Now, Kathy, we break down the word essential. That means essence, right? That's the essence of who Kathy is. So imagine Kathy has to put some of those things to the wayside to be accepted in society, accepted at work, and things like that, right? And imagine she's a 14-year-old. And she says, Kathy, as a 14-year-old, a freshman, if I can't bring everything of who I am into this school, maybe this school thing's not for me. And even though we have state legislation said that kids can't drop out, they may not drop out physically, but they drop out mentally, right? And a lot of that is because they can't be who they want to be. That's who they are. That don't mean you don't follow policy and expectations, things like that, but just who you are as a person. What's another takeaway? And I'll put this to bed. What's another takeaway?
I sort of think about when we have students in our classrooms as educators, we want to know about their learning styles. We want to know how we can reach them. Well, this is the same thing, is it not? I mean, in terms of being able to reach them where they're at, where they're coming from, where they may be.
And what's important to them?
What's important to them. It's almost the same discussion, because we wouldn't want that teacher that goes in the classroom every day and lectures to their students. That's all they ever do. because that's not going to address the majority of kids sitting in that room. Well, we have to realize that, and what happens is we get caught up in race in this discussion, and it's so much beyond race, because there's so many things that's involved in diversity that we can do a lot better job in terms of making it more inclusive.
And whether it's this or students' interests or whatever it is, it's almost like, an iceberg. You only see about 8 to 10% above the water, right? And the rest of it's below the surface. And so a lot of times with our students, we just see about 8 to 10% of what they're really about, right? But it's that deep culture that can address their learning, can address building relationships with them. And the more we show of ourselves also, they only know about 8 to 10% of us also, right? But the more they see, how many times you've been in Richmond and you're at Walmart or Dick's or B-Dubs, and they's like, Miss Kathy, what you doing at Buffalo Wild Wings? She's like, it's 50-cent wing night. What you think I'm doing here? The reason why they lose their minds when they see Miss Kathy is because they never see her in a different context other than the teacher. They believe teachers live below the school, and they come up Monday morning and just start teaching, because they never see you in a different context. So even that we know a lot of this stuff about them, they need to see some other stuff about us also. You don't have to give them your address or your cell number, but some other things that you can connect and relate to them. All right. So diversity and inclusion. Just like Mr. Saylor said, what happens is that when we talk about diversity, I'm not going to read this to you. You all know this is. When we talk about diversity, the three things we talk about is race, class, and gender. Right? You all don't have a lot of ethnic diversity in Estill County. That's correct, right? But you do have diversity in Estill County, right? Because you have students in poverty. You have some students with a little money. You have some students with a lot of money. You have students in special ed. You have students who are gifted. That's diversity, right? But we get hung up on those three right there. But the issue is with you all students, if you all are cranking out students who are strong, they go off to college, and if we're not preparing them to deal with a more diverse and global society, we're setting them up. Is that a fair statement? Right? But also, as they go through that, they just can't think it's just race, class, and gender either. There's diversity within diversity. Inclusion and belonging. Inclusion, cultivating conditions where every staff person and leadership is fully engaged. Their contributions are recognized and valued as differences are strategically leveraged so that the organization can strive. So inclusion, that everybody feels engaged, they can thrive within the organization for faculty and staff. That's been included. But we want people to feel a sense of belonging. It has been said that diversity is like being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance, and belonging is dancing like no one's watching. It's that sense of psychological safety that students, staff, faculty, and leadership can be their authentic selves without fear of judgment based on race, gender, social class, sexuality, age, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So can they walk in our buildings and be their authentic selves? That's what belonging means, okay? That sense of belonging. And can our staff do that? Can our leadership and all that? Everyone. When we feel a sense of belonging, it's not because we are the same as everyone else. It's because we have been accepted as we are. But the one I really want to spend a little more time on is this. Because we have to really know our students if we really have a good understanding of equity. And I'll say this, I don't tell people how to teach, I don't tell people to lead or nothing like that. I hang my hat on two things. If you don't have equitable practices and you don't have a culture in your school that's conducive for learning, good luck on all of those strategies. It's because culture eats strategies for breakfast. I know y'all know that, right? The environment is crucial. But the other part of that is equity. With that said, how would you define education equity? Somebody give me you don't have to give me your Webster's definition or whatever, but when you hear the term education equity, what comes to mind?
love it.
Okay.
We're giving them a productive struggle, but everybody's productive struggle is a little bit different.
Okay. All right. Meeting where they are, right? And challenging them, expectations. All right. What else?
That's a picture of the kids sitting behind the fence. You've got the different little boxes so that every kid can see those things at the same level.
Okay. Give them what they need.
Little support to meet their needs.
Okay. All right. I can receive both of those. Anyone else? Okay. You go. Now, remember what's your name? Remember what Tanya said, okay? Like my last slide of equity is going to come back to what she said. All right? So, what does it look like in a classroom? What does it sound like in a classroom? Equity. I remember I used to work at, back in the day, I used to work at KDE. So I was, where is she? I think she's right there. We came in together, right? Yeah. So we're standing there, and I was kind of perplexed because I don't think I ever came to Estill County before, and I thought I've been in every district in the state. And I was like, and then I was like right in Richmond and say, how did I not come to Estill County? But anyway, so I was over Title I, equity, and migrant, all that stuff at KD for like 5 or 6 years. And so I had to go to all these different districts, and every time I would like go to real Eastern Kentucky, not this Richmond, Irvin, that ain't Eastern Kentucky. You know, I keep trying to tell folks at EKU, like, this is Central Kentucky. I'm talking about Martin County, Owsley, Lecture, the real Eastern Kentucky. And they were like, why are you coming here to talk about equity? We don't have any black kids. Oh, I almost cussed. I'm sorry. Are y'all taping this? Mr. Sayers trying to set me up. Forgot where I was for a second. Had to shift back to professional. Anyway, I was like, you don't have to have black kids to address equity? And then I knew I was at the right place. The fact that, you said I don't need to be here because we don't have any black kids. So why are you talking about equity? That's why I'm like, I'm in the right place. I need to be here, right? And so I would go to different places. In the mountains, people would say that. So what does that look like, though? What does equity look like? She kind of alluded to it. What does it look like in a classroom? Making accommodations for students. DI. What else?
I think everybody's participating.
People are engaged, right? Students not staring, but engaged. There's a difference, right? Exactly. So what does your district do to ensure education equity for all students? What are some, I'm not talking about items of excellence. I'm talking what are some systemic things we know that address all students' needs in Estill County? Something systemic. Because we know all the schools are doing good things, but how do you formalize those good things that are meeting students' needs? That's not a rhetorical question. I was looking for a response. What are you doing systemically to, just give me one thing.
I think it's PBIS in our district, and, the expectations are the same. You follow those expectations. Here's your consequences. If you do, here are the rewards.
Okay, so PBIS, right? That's addressing students. But here's the thing about PBIS. If you want to reduce discipline issues by 50% instantly, this is free. Have the adults in the building be consistent. Watch your discipline just die. The reason why majority students just do what they're allowed to do, really. You got the 1%ers now, they're going to try you nonstop regardless. But the rest of them only do what they're allowed to do because I can go down this hallway and have a ball cap on, nobody say a word. I'll go down this hallway and they wear me out. And then the kids will play that against faculty and leadership. Is that a fair statement? So technically, I'm going to write a book on consistency and put PBIS out of business. Because it doesn't make a difference. You have PBIS champs, all that. If it's not consistent by the adults, it's a futile process. Is that a fair statement? So let me ask you this. Why is it so difficult? Because we want students to be consistent, right? And you know, if you have children of your own, if you're not consistent, right? You be at home at night worrying what they're doing with it. So why is it so difficult for the adults to be consistent in our schools, particularly around discipline?
Personal value.
Personal value? Tell me more.
If you are, I'm going to go back to the generational idea. If you are a certain generation, there's, that belief from a whole lot of people, spare the rod, spoil the child. And then we have others that are much younger, that have been in a much freer kind of world themselves. So we have those differences amongst the building. And then, of course, you have the personal values that are just different, regardless of age.
Now, I think you make a very good point. And I would say that students have the same thing, right? They had to bring their personal values from home. And many times, there's certain behavior that they have to put at the door to meet our behavior expectations, right? So we expect them to do that, whether you're a millennial, whether you're old school or whatever. If the principal says, this is what we're going to do to address discipline and behavior, then all staff should follow suit. Or this school may not be for you. I got this on my wall right here. So I got my leaders in the building today. And my quote says, Kathy, the culture of any organization is shaped by the worst behavior leadership will tolerate. Bottom line. People only do what they're allowed to do. When you go to a restaurant, right, and it's your birthday. Tanya, it's your birthday. You going to Malone's, right? You got the Malone's happy hour also. And you order this huge steak. I forget what it was called, and the Anthony Davis or something like that, right? It's about this big or whatever. You order a steak, and you're very specific about what you want on the steak, right? And they bring it back. I bring it out is the exact opposite. You said, well done. They brought out the cow. He's mooing. Okay? But what we usually do is we wear the waitress or the waiter out. One, they didn't cook the food. They just brought it out. They did take the order. But who can make the difference or make a change on Tanya's order or whatever? The manager, right? The leader of that night. Not the waiter, not the waitress. And so the consistency at a school, okay, I promise you, you all know this, can reduce discipline so quickly. Not that I've never been in y'all schools. I don't know if y'all have discipline problems or not. But I know y'all have children, so there's a good chance there's a little misbehavior every now and then, right? They're kids. Okay. So PBIS, it's your fault you got me on this whole tangent about discipline. It's really not that difficult, really. It's just the adults. Anything else? One more systemic thing. PBIS. Anything else? Okay, and that's implemented consistently across the board in the district, okay, and meeting students' needs. All right, so that wasn't difficult. Education equity is the provision of personalized resources, instruction, academic support needed for all individuals to reach common goals. In other words, the goals and expectations are the same for all students, but the supports needed to achieve those goals depend on the students' needs. All right? And we also have equity for staff and faculty, right? And leadership. You know, this is just a Clevelandism, man, you know. Harry Wong didn't say it, Roger said it. I believe you have professional development and staff development. I think staff development is something that's very systemic wide, that you're going to do something on transforming the culture of the district, right? Everybody needs to understand how important school culture is. So everybody's part of that training. Professional development, you need to focus on instructional technology. That's your need. You have something else. That's an individual need around equity for staff. So staff development is for everybody. Professional development is for individual needs. Correct? That would be an equity thing for Here's the best way I can, in this particular time, on March 9th, 2021, the best way I can explain equity is this. Imagine we're all in the ocean, and we're all in a storm, right? We're all in the ocean, we're in a storm. And the storm is made up of COVID-19, social injustice, economic strain, and trauma. That's the storm we've been in for about a year and a half now, right? And we're all out in the ocean. But we're all situated differently, even though we're all in the same storm. Because you are in an ocean liner. You're feeling it, but it's not that bad. You are in a yacht, so you feel a little bit more than she is. You are in a rowboat, so you're really feeling it, right? The girl way back there in the pink, guess what? You're on a life raft. And Mr. Sailor, he's on a life preserver. We're all in the same storm, but we're situated differently. And you can't use universal strategies for individual needs. All right? And so, folks who haven't done a lot of stuff on equity lately, I've been trying to use this moment, what we're in, to help them understand that we're all situated differently. When our students come to school, they are situated differently. And so if you have a group of students, I live in Lexington, so we're notorious. Our lowest performing group of students are usually African-American males. And so let's say we're at, where did my son go? Douglas. And so you have 195 African-American males who are novice or apprentice. What we want to do is apply the same strategy for 195 young men, which makes no sense whatsoever, just because they all black. That's like applying the same strategy for all the kids in special education. Would that make any sense? No, but a lot of times we get caught up in that. Well, if they're in special ed, they probably need this. If they're in this group, they probably need this. That's not equitable. That's not equitable at all. Address students as individuals, regardless what group they're in. Is that a good way to explain equity? That makes sense? Kind of cool. It's dope, isn't it? Y'all can use it if y'all want to. Equity literacy. How many of y'all familiar with that term? Equity literacy is comprised of the skills and dispositions that enable educators to recognize, respond to, and redress conditions that deny some students access to educational opportunities enjoyed by their peers. And so all this is saying is that we need to be able to recognize inequities, respond appropriately so we can change the conditions and kind of eradicate those conditions for some groups of students. That's being equity literate, knowing how, okay? Knowing how. Equity literate educators recognize and draw upon the resiliency and other funds of knowledge accumulated by poor students and students of color to reject deficit views that focus on, this is where the amen is. Reject deficit views that focus on fixing disenfranchised students rather than fixing the things that disenfranchise those students. We don't need to fix students, right? And even if it's something that's coming external of the schools, we still want to make sure we have equitable practices in place so we're not complicit of those things that are impacting them outside of the school. That makes sense? So we're not trying to fix them. We're trying to fix the things that disenfranchise students. And they're going to blame it on the school district anyway. Right? They blame everything on the school, Like none of this stuff happens outside of school. It's always the school district, So that's been an equity literate educator. Instructional equity. Instructional pedagogy, personalized instruction, culturally responsive instruction, place-based learning, and DI. You had mentioned that before, right? So this is the key right here. We do this a little bit, we do this a little bit, we do this a little bit, but imagine if you took your students from Irving, Kentucky, and taught them about their culture, and taught them about the city and the county of Estill County. Don't you think they're a little bit more engaged in learning about some other things, maybe in Kentucky or in the United States? But place-based learning, a good example, Owsley County back in the day had this theater And so the theater burnt down like years ago, so they decided to rebuild this theater. I think it's Alsea or Elliott County, one of them, and rebuild this theater, and they taught everything around this theater. They taught the culture, business, okay, science, technology, math, everything around the culture. Place-based learning. Teach them about where they are, who they are. I used to be amazed. I taught at Moorhead also. I was amazed how many people who lived in Appalachia did not know Appalachian culture and how rich the culture was. I was amazed, and I was like, the kind of culture that you have, where you're from. So those are just examples of instructional equity, instructional examples. Equity isn't handing a kid a laptop or a hotspot. It's knowing the systemic conditions that led to the lack of laptop and working to mitigate them. So when COVID came, we gave everybody a device and a hotspot and assumed we met their equity needs. No, we just got started. And what COVID did for poor white children, African Americans in general, Hispanics and things like that, it exposed the inequities that are already there. That's all it did. Right? Because a lot of things in Appalachia and things like that were already struggling, but nobody was talking about it, right? And so it just exposed a lot of that. So just equity is just not giving people, materials and devices and things and that. It goes beyond that. Now here's the cool thing right here. Tanya talked about it. Equity is the process. Equality is the outcome. What does that mean? Equity is the process, equality is the outcome. Y'all know that's pretty dope, right? That's cool, right? Y'all can tweet it if y'all want to, it's all right. Just spell my name right. What does that mean? Equity is the process, equality is the outcome. Where's my elementary folks? All right. You got a 5-year-old kindergartner, right? Starting school. If they have an equal process for the next 12 years, what would that look like? Would that be good or bad? Be good or bad if it's equal? So you want them all the way through school to have an equitable process, right? So they have an equal opportunity when they leave Estill County High School. If they put skin in the game. They got to put some skin in the game. But if they go through this equitable process, then when they leave here, that's on you now. We gave you exactly what you needed for 13 years, and now it's on you. But if they go through an equal process for 13 years, it's hit or miss. And they may or may not be prepared. So the $64,000 question is, do you think in our district, I said ours since he invited me back, so yeah, I'm part of y'all staff now. Are we giving students an equitable process or an equal process? If you had, let's do this, let's get a Likert scale. One is the lowest, 5's the highest, and rather we're giving them an equal process. Where do you think we are as a district in reference to equity? And I know that's really not fair, but that's okay, y'all get over it. Where do you think we are as relates to equity? You can't heal it until you reveal it, right? Anybody? Well, go with your school. Don't go district, okay? Because you may say, I don't know. I'm over at the elementary school. I don't know that. I'm at the middle school. I don't know about what district does. You really should, but we'll go with that today. What do you think? Where are you, you brave soul? Where do you think you are from a scale of 1 to 5?
Probably in the, just looking at the school itself, I think we're probably a 3.
Okay. See, that wasn't that difficult, was it? She said a 4. Like, look, we're a 4.
We're a 4.
Don't sell short. And then I'm gonna come say, all right, show me why, but right now you're a 4, right? Anyone else? Where are you, middle school? Yeah. you got to have two things to work in a middle school: aspirin and a sense of humor. You know, if you don't have those, don't go there. Anyone else? What do you think? 1 through 5. Basically,
What's pre-COVID? Let me say that.
oh yeah, don't think now. You know, all that just out the window right now. Maybe we can have that conversation again in August. But yeah, we will. We will.
I would have a difficult time rating us very highly because I don't know that we've had the intentional discussion around it that we should be having. We're primary.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just talking about high school.
Got it.
But I think we talk about aspects of it, but to have a discussion as a whole and to say that we can ensure everything, I think we need to move forward, so we have a hard time rating us too high.
Okay. Now, President Benson used to get upset with me when we'll have some kind of big meeting and we're talking about the Council on Post-Secondary Education was over all the colleges and universities. And we'll be talking about whatever, I don't know what it is, you know, usually around diversity or whatever, and they ask me. And I said, I don't know if we're going to get there, Prez. He's like, why? And I said, because right now we have a compliance culture, not a commitment culture. I said, we're doing it because CPE said we had to do it. We're doing it because KDE said we had to do it. Or we're doing it because the superintendent said we had to do it. Or are we doing it because we should be doing it because it's best for children? To your point, we want to make sure we move from, I don't know, I'm just talking. I don't know where you are. But we definitely want to move from a compliance culture to a commitment culture. And an intentional culture, not an accidental culture. An accidental culture is BC, before COVID, your test scores went up, right? They come out to Estill County, you had the highest scores in the state. They come out and they interview the superintendent. Mr. Sir, how'd you do this? And he's like, well, I'll tell you what, I don't know. We had pizza during the whole time we had testing. And we had peanut butter cookies. And, you know, we did this. If he says that, we're not quite sure how we did it, right? But if he says, you know what, we realized that our freshmen are coming in really not reading where they need to be. So we start teaching reading across the curriculum. We also need to start a mentoring program. We made sure our IEPs were implemented with fidelity, and we did this and that. That can be replicated. That's an intentional culture. An accidental culture is that we try to bribe the kids to do well and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So we want to make sure we have an intentional culture, right, to keep our students safe. So equity is the process, equality is the outcome. We have to make sure, and I'll leave this alone, that we know the difference between schooling and education. Schooling is going to school for 13 years and acquiring knowledge. Education is going to school for 13 years and be able to apply that knowledge. Knowledge and wisdom is not the same thing. Knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing you don't put tomatoes in fruit salad, right? There's a distinct difference. So we can have kids go through school acquiring knowledge, but if they can't apply that, okay, they weren't educated. Is that a fair statement? All right, let's push on. So before I move on, what's the difference between diversity and belonging? Inclusion and belonging. What's the biggest difference between inclusion and belonging? Exactly. You feel that comfortable, right? You may be included. I may invite you, right? I have a serious Christmas party too, before COVID. So if I invited you, but I invited you to the party, but then, you know, I don't play any kind of music he likes, right? Nobody talks to him or whatever, but you're included. You walked in, but does he have a sense of belonging? No, right? He could be himself. He's still acting like he's still at work, right? I'm like, man, relax. Because he's not comfortable. All right, barriers to inclusion. This is the big piece right here. I'm on track. Implicit bias. When you hear that term, we've heard it's been on the news, and all this other stuff, implicit bias. What do you think when you hear the term implicit bias? What comes to mind, no pun intended? Implicit bias. Thoughts? Why did Mr. Saylor have me come up here and interrupting you all's dinner? You all could be at home and tell them what your kids did. The dogs done tore up the house. So why are we sitting in this auditorium talking about diversity, inclusion, and implicit bias? Why are we talking about this? Y'all have all white kids. Why are we talking about this? Huh?
Because all of our white kids are still in that now, they haven't much
And we still may have biases about those children, right? And we may have biases about ourselves. The thing about implicit bias, we all have them. It refers to attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding and actions and decisions in an unconscious manner. Implicit bias means you're not aware of your biases. They're unconscious. It's not like you're doing this, like you wake up Monday morning like, oh yeah, I've been waking all weekend to be biased against my third graders. But you may say something, right, that triggers a certain behavior because of your biases. Tell me you're aware of them. But once I make you aware of them, that's when you work on them. So the thing about this, if you want to take a couple things away from about implicit bias, is that we all have them. They come from our lived experiences, but they can be mitigated. They can be lessened. But we'll always probably have those. You know why? Because we're human. But they can have a negative impact on people. Okay? Let's see if this video works. All right, no sound. He'll bring it back. He's on it. You ready for me? All right.
I had to read a few times just to believe what it was telling me. The researchers recruited about 135 preschool teachers. They had to watch video footage of 4 kids playing. A black boy, a black girl, a white boy, and a white girl. And they told the teachers, the subjects, watch the video, there may be some challenging behaviors. As soon as you see something that could become challenging, hit the enter key on your keypad. Here's the trick. There was no challenging behavior. The researchers were using eye scan technology to see which child the teachers were looking at the most. And what they found is that the teachers, both white and black alike, spent the most time watching the black boy, waiting for bad behavior that never came. There's one more really interesting headline in this study, which comes later. The teachers were also given a one-paragraph description to read of a hypothetical child with a stereotypical name who behaves pretty badly in class, pushes, scratches, throws toys. And some of the teachers were also given some biographical information that helped make sense of that behavior. They were told that the child lives with his mother, her father has been in and out for years, they're relatively poor, the mother is depressed, works 3 jobs. Researchers wanted to know if knowing this information made the teachers more empathetic to the kid. Well, here's the shock. It did, but only if the teacher and the child were of the same race. If the teacher and the child, a white teacher and a black child, or even a black teacher and a white child, knowing that biographical information, those teachers were less empathetic towards those students. And here's why this matters. Imagine, if this is true, if there's this empathy deficit in preschool, well, imagine where else that's true.
Okay. That's a lot in like 2.5 minutes, isn't it? So our biases. Now, we know that those 135 preschool teachers, the majority are good people, right? Nice people. So what did you see in the video? And here's the other thing. The reason I chose this video is because the study was conducted at Yale. Because we have biases, we assume since it was Yale, it has to be legit. Because if it did at EKU or UK or somewhere, we had to question it. But since it's at Yale, it has to be legit. Because I know how we think. So what did you think about, what's your initial thoughts about the video in general? You know, why do you think both teachers, it didn't make a difference what the race of the teachers were, white or black, they were still looking at the black boy, which there was no misbehavior. So why do you think that was? Where do you think that, though, where do you think those perceptions came from the teachers? Because like I said, I mean, preconceived notions, okay?
Television.
So the media, okay?
It's what they've been told.
That's what they've been told? Okay. Now, we do agree that probably most of those people are probably nice people, right? But there's still implications for those biases, right? Not only for, because you know how we can be sometimes, we'll pass it on. 4 years old, by the time he gets to the 4th grade, you know how Roger was. He was like that in preschool, you know, right? And then we go to Infinite Campus. I think Infinite Campus should be shut down for first 2 weeks of school. Don't look at anybody's files or nothing. Give a kid a clean slate. Especially anybody who had behavior issues the year before. Because that can color our thoughts, right? It only even bring our biases out even more if they see the history of the student's, behavior. It might have been you the reason why the kid was behaving that way. She was like, no, it wasn't. You never know. But our biases are that strong. Our biases are that strong. They have impact. And then if the student internalizes those beliefs about him or her, it's going to come out in their behavior later in life because they internalize what people thought about them. Okay? So our biases are really, really impactful on people. But here's the thing. If Tanya has a bias about Roger, and Roger's a 5th grader or whatever, before we go run to Tanya, be more concerned about the impact before the intent. Right? So make sure the student is taken care of first, and then we can go back to Tanya and say, realize, did you know that you said something to Roger and this is how he responded? And she's like, I had no idea. I know, Tanya, because it's unconscious, it's implicit. She didn't, but now she knows, and so in the back of her mind, she says, I need to pay attention to this, make sure. It's almost like calling on all boys in trade class and never calling the girls. You don't realize you're doing it until somebody brings it to your attention. It's not that you hate girls. It's implicit. Because you've been told for 20 years, boys should be better at math. I sit in meetings all the time on campus. We're in a meeting, and we were literally asked a female professor with a PhD, will you get up and take the notes? Really? Ask that lady that. The bias is, and the microaggression is, that since you're a woman, you should be able to write and you take those notes. Now, some of y'all have been nice because y'all know y'all can raise your hand and testify that this happened to you before in meetings. But since you're a woman, you should be able to do that. Oh, okay, I'm making this up. All right, let's move on. Okay. Our biases are that powerful. They come from our lived experiences, perspectives from the past, from the media, and whatever. And so just because they're unconscious don't mean we don't deal with them. We deal with them, okay? And just because you have biases don't make you a bad person. It makes you a human. But that don't mean we don't need to address them either. And here's some ways you can address those. And I'm not going to go through all these, but I do want to talk about one or two. To mitigate our biases, treating folks as individuals, not groups. All right? Treat people as individuals, not groups. And so every time there is a documentary on Kentucky, where do they go? Eastern Kentucky. And where do they go? Do they find a really rich family in Pikeville? Oh, no. It's got to be somebody under a bridge or something like that. And all that, That's still going to come up in a second. Ty, you see my presentation? So treating people as individuals, not as groups. Cultures are not monolithic, right? You have 43 million Latino folks in this country. But under that umbrella is Dominican, Puerto Rico, all this, so you can't assume. And that's our perceptions, right? You've heard this. It'd be 3 or 4 people in a car pull up that's Hispanic. You see all those Hispanics in Walmart? It's 3. What you mean, all them? And you got 6 people in your car coming to Walmart. Perceptions. People as individuals. And the other piece is about imagery and things like that. So let me ask you all this. Your student and body is not very diverse, ethnically diverse, right? But is there diverse imagery in all your schools of other people? If not, the superintendent said he will pay to get some stuff. Now, if you still got Shaquille O'Neal in the library and all that kind of stuff, y'all in trouble. But do you have imagery, a diverse imagery of pictures and books and things like that? Because when we talked about preparing them, right, for a global society, how difficult would that be to diversify our imagery? Well, how would that help our students? How would that help our students? You can't say anything, you can't say anything, you can't say anything. How would that help our students, y'all? Or why would we do that? Exactly. They may actually leave Central Kentucky. There's a chance. There's a chance they may leave Central, and they may come back. Great. But if we prepare them for a global society, they'll come back even stronger. And what? With more resources. You know, our greatest resource in Estill County is human resources, right? Right. But if they go back, if they go and leave, and they do adapt, and they try to come back here, and they don't feel that same kind of love, they're not going to stay. They're not going to stay.
A lot of times they're treated as government.
Oh, when they come back, or when they stick around?
No, you're trying to change the way we live. You're trying to change our culture.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to do those things. I don't know if you guys are aware of what got me going down this line was the fact that I started hearing from former students that had graduated from this high school that said that they just did not know what it was like outside of Estill County. That they went, and all of a sudden it was cultural shock to them what they were experiencing and how they experienced it. And then some of those individuals are now back in our community, and some of them are seen as radicals. They're pushing a radical agenda, you know, those types of things. And I think that, you know, they do. They get uncomfortable, so they end up, they leave, or they just decide to move on somewhere else. And, you know, and it's not the fact that anybody's trying to be bad, I don't think. It's just sometimes we've just got to be willing to let go and experience something. Mm-hmm. And I think that's hard sometimes. And nobody's trying to take away. You talked earlier about we should really talk about our culture, the culture of Appalachia. It should be really important to us. But it doesn't mean it's the only way.
No.
And that's, I think sometimes we get caught up that we're trying to change who we are or what we are or how we think. But just to understand there's a different perspective.
Yeah, and you shouldn't have to change who you are. You should maintain the core of who you are, but you should respect other folks and how they are. And there's, you know, difference does not denote deficit. It just means it's different, right? And we'll assume that it's different, that one has more value than the other, and that's not the case. But we struggle with that. But you're right that students will, well, not students, they won't be students then when they come back. If they experience that, they'll be looking at that when they come back. And that's the thing. It's not like they're, you know, trying to change people. They want the community, right, to flourish, right? And so that's why I'm thinking that, but if we do it prior to them leaving, then if they do leave and they come back, like, I felt great when I lived here, and I'm going to go back and do whatever, go to school, get a job, but I'm going to come back and do these things. I think when I was talking to you, I don't know if it was Chris Winkler. I went to school with Chris Winkler, and I went coach Mike Jones down at Union. But I think it was, you said Chris Winkler's son Is that and he came back and things of that nature. And so, I went to school with, Chris Wicker was funny because, we had a football dome at Moorhead, and probably 75% of the players were probably African American. And so, we have conversations, stuff like all the time. But you knew when he first got there, he didn't interact with that many people before like that, but for the most part, he was fine. I don't know if that's because how he was raised or whatever, but I'm sure his son left and came back and he can interact. We want to do that before they leave, right? But I don't mean Chris Wiggler can't be who he is as someone from Estill County just so he can try to fit in. No, you don't change who you are, but you respect those folks who are different from you. And I think a lot of times in athletics, it tends to be a little easier sometimes because they rely on each other. But not all the times, but sometimes. 3 things about bias. We all have them. They derive from our lived experience, and biases can be mitigated. Okay? How many of y'all have heard this before? Microaggressions. I'm sure more than one of y'all have heard this before, right? Exactly. I just gave the example of microaggression where I'm in a meeting and I told the female professor to take notes. Or a microaggression is, we'll keep talking about gender. We're in a meeting and it's 5 men and 2 women. And so you're giving your example of what we should do, right, to improve the district or whatever. And so while you're talking, all the men are texting or talking to each other, whatever, right? And you say, you ought to do A, B, and C. You stop, and then you say the exact same thing, and everybody starts listening and taking notes. Very small, right? It's micro. But if this happens to her on a regular basis, it's going to go from a micro issue to a macro issue. And this is going to be in the superintendent's office and dealing with the board and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So deal with these small things that happen to people. It's like mosquito bites. You're getting bitten all day long or all week long, and after a while you just blow up, and now you're just angry. Okay? Microaggressions are defined as everyday, subtle, intentional, oftentimes unintentional interactions or behaviors that communicate some sort of bias toward historically marginalized groups. And here's a couple of examples of them. Microassault, which you don't really see that too much in schools. I mean, it happens, but not too much. You see micro insults, and the one that you see more likely is not validating people's experiences. Okay? So they give you your experience or whatever, and you just dismiss it. They're all micro, but they turn into macro or major or big issues if not dealt with. But this explains a little better. Here are different types of things. What are you? You speak English so well. What do your people think about that? You're really pretty for someone so dark. Your name is too hard to pronounce. Can I call you Mary? Why do you sound so white? You don't act like a normal black person. You're not like Muslim people, other Muslim people. I used to get this all the time, from folks I worked with at KDE. I do a presentation, they walk up to me, it's like, Roger, you're so articulate, you speak so well. As if I'm gonna get in front of a bunch of educators like, yo, what's up? You see, and they thought that was a compliment. But then, here's a good example. I got any coaches in here? Any coaches? No coaches? Okay. Anybody that watched the national championship game? Alabama and who they play? Clemson? Ohio State? Yeah, Ohio State, that's right. Devontae Smith, wide receiver for Alabama. Heisman Trophy winner. And what's the quarterback's name? Mac Jones? Mac Jones have a great play. He's cerebral, smart. Devontae Smith, African-American male, he's athletic. You know how smart you have to be to run off the scrimmage line and playing football, read the defense while you're running full speed and make the right decision so you can be open. That's just not athletic ability. That's intelligence. Or when Mac Jones is interviewed, they never say how well spoken he was. Devontae Smith interviewed, he's so well spoken. Now y'all seen that before, haven't y'all? How many of y'all seen that before? Testify. Exactly. That's a microaggression. Why are you focusing on this person's ability to speak, but you don't say anything about this person speaking? And I see it in sports all the time. I just did a training for all the EKU coaches. And they could easily identify with them because they hear it all the time. Because guess what the coaches said? They do it to our players. That's a microaggression. Small, nothing big, but if it happens to you over and over and over again, it has detrimental implications for that. Okay? That's what we mean by microaggressions. Now, have you heard those terms before? People say those things? Okay. I'll just make sure I'm not making this up. So, where does all this come from? Our microaggressions. Now, microaggressions can be explicit sometimes, so it's not like it's implicit bias, like where you don't realize you're doing it. The microaggressions, a lot of times you do know you're doing it. And sometimes you don't. 7 seconds. We're going to talk about where this comes from, and then we'll be out of here. 7 seconds. What comes to mind when you see this? What's the first thing to pop in your head? Slurpees, Big Gulp, convenience store. You working one? Here? Oh, I was going to say, because we don't have many in Lexington. And the only time I see them is I go down south, like Myrtle Beach or Georgia or Florida, something like that. But as soon as I see one driving in the highway and I see that sign, like all the stores are coming up, I really don't have to stop, but I end up stopping. I'm like, why did I stop at this 7-Eleven? But before I even stop, those things pop in my head. Anybody live near Cincinnati or go there every now and then? So I lived there for a while. And when my father still lives there. When I'm going across the bridge and I see a La Rosa sign, La Rosa's Pizza. I've had a La Rosa's Pizza and I only win. But guess what? 513-347-111 La Rosas. So as soon as I see the sign La Rosas, things pop in my head. I think about athletics because Buddy La Rosas, he sponsors all the pizzas for all the teams around the city and suburban school districts in Cincinnati. So I think about automatic athletics. When I worked in those middle schools, guess what pizza we ordered? We had pizza for kids, but La Rosas. So things pop in my head, right? So what if you had this experience? You like this guy who grew up in Bell County and went to school, not a lot of, if any, African Americans, a handful of them, and you get all these experiences growing up in Bell County, and then you go play ball with a team that's almost 2/3 African American. What do you think when you first enter that first team meeting? What pops in your head, Jeff Saylor? I'm just talking about him. He grew up in Bell County, went to school at Carson Newman, played ball with my cousin. They rode back and forth from Jefferson City, back and forth to Middlesboro, right, back and forth. But he didn't have that many experiences with African American folks. Is that true? And so those 7 seconds. And so he first entered that first, I can't say what came to his mind when he first entered that first team meeting with that many teammates who didn't look like him. But some things that he heard and learned from Bell County popped up in his head. Is that a fair statement? Good, bad, or indifferent, it popped in your head. Look at this study, another Ivy League. I had to do this because y'all won't believe me. According to a study at NYU, people make 11 decisions and or assumptions about an individual within the first 7 seconds of contact. Within the first 7 seconds. So I don't know what y'all saying about me. I'm just playing. But think about that. Even a title or anything. I used to teach a class at Northern Kentucky University called Race, Class, and Gender. If you were an educator or a nursing student, you had to take this course. It was a night course, all undergraduates. And I used to have like 35 students every semester. So my first semester teaching the class, I wasn't dressed like this. I had like a UC t-shirt on, some jeans, and I got to class early. And I had Race, Class, and Gender, 301, whatever it was, Dr. Roger Cleveland. So I got there first, and the students start coming in. 99.9% of my students were white. And so I just sit there, and they come in, and I start hearing them complain. I can't believe we got to take this Black Studies class. Like, I'm going to just talk about black people for 16 weeks, right? Oh, I didn't say nothing. So at 6:30, I get up, I go walk on, say, welcome to my class, I'm Roger Cleveland, and the looks on their faces. But they already assumed, based on the title of the course, what I was going to talk about. Now, they forgot about the gender stuff and the class stuff. They just stuck on what? Race, right? Imagery, perceptions, that powerful. Mental models. All right. You had that one card left, right? You got that one card left, remember? That you didn't rip up? Kathy, you still have that? All right. I need you to pull that out, everyone. And get your pen. I promise you, I'm about to leave you alone. All right, you need something to write with, and you can use that card to write on. I'm going to show you a list of words. You're not allowed to write them down or take a picture of them. Okay? I have to say that now. You can't write them down. You can't take a picture of them, but you have to watch the screen because the words will not be up there long. All right, you ready? Don't write them down. Don't take a picture of them. Here are the words. All right. Now write down as many as you remember. I need at least 7. Write down as many as you can remember. No pressure, but you only have like 10 seconds left. And you can help each other if you like. You can help each other. It used to be called cheating. Now it's called cooperative learning. Don't give it up, man. But it's fun, isn't it? If I had known, I had you come up here and do this. All right, 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. Time's up. Right? So, all the real smart people in the room who wrote down the word sleep, stand up. If you wrote down the word sleep, stand up. Good job, you all. Stand up. Good job, you all. No, stand up. It's okay. Good job, you all. That's right. Because sleep is not one of the words. Here's a couple other you all wrote down sleep. Y'all just didn't stand up. So here's the original list. So you won't say I'm lying. And so about 12 or so, 15 of you all wrote down the word sleep. Why did you write down the word sleep? Psychologists, why they write down the word sleep?
Because it fits into their schema.
Their schema, their association, right?
And they want to be right so bad, they want to put words. So.
And a mental model. And some of you all wrote down the words. Listen to what he's saying. They want to be so bad. When I said 5 seconds, you're like, I'm going to get at least 6 or 7, so I'm going to be left out. And so many of you all wrote down the word sleep either in the middle or the end of your list. Well, so you did it by association, right? And you added sleep to that list. So the question for me is this. What are some things we're adding to our students' list that don't belong there? What are some things we're adding to their list based on our past experiences, based on our biases and our schemas and our mental models? We have to be really mindful and cognizant about adding things to people's list based on our past experiences or lived experiences. And we're all guilty of it, right? But you can mitigate that by looking at people as individuals. You know, and so we add things to people's list. What are some things people add to Estill County's list? If you say I'm from Estill County, what do they add to your list? Poor? They assume you're poor? You on a roll right now. Poor. Even in Central Kentucky? Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, so we add things to people's list, and where do those assumptions come from if they've never been here? And they could be right there in Richmond, right? Like 22 miles away, and you're going to try to call somebody a redneck, right? So we add things to people's lists. We add things to teachers' lists, right? work 8 months out of the year, don't work after 3:30. So those who are not in the education arena have these assumptions, right? And have these biases. I tell people all the time, going into teaching to get some results is like burning down your house to make toast. It's not worth it. Okay? You're not getting off, summers and things like that. And I tell them, I was like, look, if that's why you come to our program, you need to do something else, okay? Because that's unreal. So we have these things, and we have these things called mental models. And mental models is like my psychologist saying, talking about is your schema, right? And somebody said it earlier. An example I'll use, and what happened in 2012 related to University of Kentucky. They won the national championship, right? And they played in New Orleans. And typical UK fans, the arena seats like 19,000, 100,000 people from Kentucky went to New Orleans. And Kentucky fans are having a good time. Sea of blue on Bourbon Street. Those who have tickets went to the game. Kentucky wins the game. They go back out. They're having a good time. Now it's time to interview someone from Kentucky. All these smart people from Kentucky, and they find that guy. Okay, so he's got Go Big Blue on his shirt. He's blue on the outside. He's had 12 hurricanes. He's blue on the inside. He can't put two sentences together. He has two teeth, one in his mouth, one in his pocket. Of all these smart people from Kentucky, they picked that person. And the mental model of Kentucky is that guy, right? And all us Kentuckians know that that's not how Kentucky is, right? Now, that guy exists in Kentucky, but that's not the norm in Kentucky. So what's the other 49 states' mental model of Kentucky, or their scheme about Kentucky? That person, right? And there's any kind of documentary or whatever, it's always something negative about Kentucky. And if it's not Kentucky, it's Tennessee or Mississippi or Arkansas. It's always the South. And so when people come here, they're looking for that. They're adding things to our list that don't belong. But the thing is, we should know better. We're educators, and we add things to students' list that don't belong. And we've been trained not to. True? But training's not worth a dime without implementation, right? I tell my son all the time, soap only works when you use it. Okay? So I can train you all day long, but if you don't actually implement it, it's a futile process. I'll be nice if I can have this. If from behind Kathy's row, not Kathy, but behind that row right there, that group of folks right there, if you all can give me, let me get to it first, and then I'll let y'all do it. Here's my name. You can pick anything you want right here. All these are takeaways. You can finish, I learned that, I realized that, I was pleased that, I was not aware of. Just finish that sentence. Give me 5 or 6 people to do that, and we'll wrap it up. So I can stick to my word.
Struggle academically or maybe you come from one of the poorest backgrounds. Sometimes what they bring to the table as far as their talent, their abilities, and whatever along the way. Because you get to see if they can show us what they're really good at on a daily. We just have such a different perspective.
And different results, wouldn't you? Life and death is in the power of the tongue. What you speak into them, they will internalize it, and it'll come out in their behavior. Good, bad, or indifferent. Their question is the expectation, right? Thank you. You know, look at that. There's a governor sitting right beside you. Governor, doctor, I don't know. You never know, but we don't maximize his potential. We don't know what he's going to do, right? You don't know if that's going to be the next governor or the mayor or whatever. But if we add something to his list that don't belong, there's a good chance he may not get there. All right, give me some more. She's got me over preaching. I'm not a preacher either. It's her fault. What else? Any one of these? A couple of y'all said y'all hungry, so we got to get out of here.
When you talk about
kids at the age that we had will still dance at our school dances because they're little and they don't care. I just have sat here and thought about how much that really applies to even diversity. Like, it's almost like, at what point do they start to care that people are looking, or start to care that people are noticing? We talk about it in the physical sense, because they still dance. And I know they don't dance like that the older they get. Like, to me, it's just kind of like a metaphor of it, I don't know, I've just had internalized that to the point of, even though we don't see it, what messages are we sending, or how do we foster them as they grow, feel like they don't belong this much? What makes them get more embarrassed or more aware? What is it we can do to help with that?
And part of that is learned behavior, right?
Yeah, and that's probably really deep, but I think
I like I like deepness. I'm gonna go there because y'all said 710, so I was like, but she's right. Well, there's one thing that you can look at. It's called micro messaging.
yeah.
And it's messages that we send that are really small that people don't really realize. For instance, it's before COVID, it's October, and I go, walk around the classroom and things like that and ask how you doing, whatever. And I never, ever stand beside her desk. I don't say anything negative, but if I never stand beside her in third grade, and she's a third grader, what message am I sending her? Teacher doesn't like me. I never said that. But I'm sending a message. It's small, right? And the kids get the same message as they matriculate through school. Preschool, first grade, second grade. After a while, they start getting messages from their peers, some messages from the adults that it's not cool to dance when you want to dance. You can't do that kind of dance. We're just saying dancing, but we're talking about other behaviors and cultures, right? They start getting us to matriculate, and we send those messages to them. And they either internalize them or they don't. The ones who don't internalize it, they still dance like they're crazy, right? But the other ones who may not feel that comfortable in a sense of belonging, they stop dancing. I need two more. Yes, ma'am. Exactly. I can't just say, I forget, a young one in the room, so but I can't assume, imagine you create a culture like you want, let's say at the high school. And where's my high school principal? You've been working all the last 3 years to get the culture just right at the high school. I come to visit, you invite me. I'll come to school and I meet, the first person I meet is the person at the front desk. What's your name? I'm here to see Josh, the principal. Hold on, he's in a meeting. I'll get with you in a second. I'm like, whoa, okay, I'm sorry. I drive back to Lex. I was like, you ever been to Estill County High School? They crazy as Hades up there. And I met one person. And now everybody's going to assume that I talk to the high schools that way. And they're going to add something to your list, all because when we talk about culture, it's just not for the certified people. It's everybody has any kind of connection to that school, which is critical.
I always try to say, like, if there was something, I don't know, she called somebody weird, and I might just say, if you just don't know what's going on, maybe they're having a bad day, maybe they were, it all comes back to, like that video. When we have more empathy and realize that we don't know what's going on, or we don't know anything about that person. At least it helps me to bias.
Exactly. Appreciate that. Anyone else? Well, I'll be remiss if I've been saying this to districts as large as Houston Independent School District. I just spoke to all their principals. They have 245,000 kids in their school district. A sea of principals, Tuscaloosa, Bryan Station, Estill County, with the COVID piece. and y'all probably already thinking about this, but be very mindful. We're so concerned about students losing learning, but we cannot lose sight on the social emotional learning piece. That when they really come back, a lot of these kids have experienced trauma, and they just experienced trauma again because of the floods. We can't be so caught up in literacy, which is truly important, and forget about the trauma that they're experiencing, not counting COVID. So make sure that we're looking at the whole child, through this experience of the pandemic and things of that nature, because I'm hearing everything about making sure that children are learning that, which is great. But if you're experiencing trauma and then our teachers are experiencing secondary trauma, living their experience of their kids, their children, or their own children, so all I'm saying is this: self-care. Give the world the best of you, not what's left of you. Okay? That's critical. So don't forget about the non-academic part. So the next question is this: what do we do? What do we do from here, leaders? We did this basic common language today: diversity, inclusion, implicit bias, microaggressions, to make sure we're all on the same page. So what do you think we should do next? Because y'all not getting rid of me. I'm like a rash. So what do we do next? What do we do systemically as a district to address particularly around two things? Not as about diversity. Diversity is just about difference. But I'm thinking about more around equity, and you can't really do good equity work until you respect diversity and make sure everybody's included. So you can't even do the equity work until you do those two things, right? So look at it under the umbrella of equity. So what are some ideas you think we should do next?
I think you have to bring in your teacher leaders.
Your teacher leaders? Okay.
They have to buy into that before everybody else is going to.
Okay. And I would say we all have to buy into it first, right?
True.
Yep. And then teacher leaders, because schools will not move without teacher leaders. Anything else do you think we should do? You want to think on it?
On building classroom systems at West Urban, and I think that's happening across the district. And in that model, the children really do take a lot of control over their own learning, and that way their values and those opportunity gaps do not continue to grow. They are closed because the students truly are driving those classrooms.
They're taking ownership of their learning. Okay. Anything else? All right. I appreciate you all's time. You worked hard today. Don't forget, give the world the best of you, not what's left of you. You practice self-care too as leaders. All right. Thank you all.